Hello, welcome back. This is Insight, Raw News' premier news show. I'm both your host and head of news, Enoch he, him, and welcome to. This is not the Pride Week special for Raw News. But in fact, welcome to the Pride Week edition of Insight. Pride Week is what Raw is doing to celebrate Pride Month. Going on all week, we're having new Pride-focused programming and cat challenges. So follow us all on social media. You can find out more about that. But for purposes of today, here are our top stories. We're going to be discussing the Black Lives Matter protests that have raged up and down the country and America. In particular, we're discussing the statue that fell in Bristol and reactions to that. I want to get in the sense of the panel thinks that was the right thing to do. We're going to be discussing Madeleine McCann and the new information that's come out in her case and why we think that case is still gripping the public attention so long after it happened. And of course, we're discussing Prince Andrew and his latest legal troubles. I bet you wish you could sweat now. But first, I'm going to introduce my guest. I'm going to start with Oscar. Oscar, welcome.
Hello, thank you for introducing me.
Yeah. I should pre-clarify we're doing a new series of introductions, and I immediately forgot we were doing it. So, Oscar, please reintroduce yourself under the new system.
So, hi, my name is Oscar. I am a second-year biological student at the University of Warwick. What can I tell you about myself? I play piano. I play some musical instruments.
Right. And my next guest is...
Hi, I'm Neeraj, he, him. I'm a second-year computer science at Warwick, computer science student at Warwick, and I'm the IT manager at Raw.
Yeah, thank you. And my next guest...
Hello, I'm Ollie. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a first-year politics and international studies student at University of Warwick. Also, my go-to facts, you're probably going to cringe now, but I'm just going to say I'm left-handed. Sorry, that's all I've got.
That's a great fact. That's a great fact.
I'm pleased.
It's fantastic. No, I like it. Left-handed. We need more left-handed people on the show.
We do.
And my final, last but definitely not least, please introduce yourself.
Hi, I'm Neil. My pronouns are he, him. I'm a first-year PPE student at work as well, and I guess my interesting thing is that I play the electric guitar.
That's fantastic. Yeah, Ollie. I don't even mean he really blew out the water there. I'm really sorry.
I knew I was going to get beaten.
Sorry about that.
No. Yeah, no, that was brutal. I mean, especially straight afterwards as well. I should have really pre-checked this and made sure you were going like last, maybe, just so that would. Yeah, apologies. Right, but no time to focus on that. We actually have news to discuss. Starting with, actually, before we get into anything, I want to issue right now a trigger warning. In this show, we're discussing police brutality and obviously child abuse. If any of these topics are triggering for you, I say, for your own sake, please stop watching now. But yeah, we're going to start off by discussing Black Lives Matter and the protests that have been in this country and in America. But before we do that, I do want to read out, Raw has issued a statement, official statement on the situation, and I would like to read it out for everyone at home. Raw 12:51 a.m. stands with protesters in America and across the world who are fighting for their right to basic human dignity in the face of government-approved police brutality and systemic structural racism. We stand with the Black community in the battle for justice. We stand with all our Black members and all Black students at Warwick who are struggling right now to win that justice and those rights. The scenes we are seeing from the USA are horrifying, and as an organization with a platform, we will not stay silent. This moment has to be a turning point in our society. The only way that can happen is if we all come together and say enough is enough. If we educate ourselves about the injustices and failings of the system we live in. If we support the people fighting on the front lines, either by joining them physically or by offering donations, signing petitions, and speaking to our representatives. If we choose not to let this go until genuine justice has been achieved, then and only then will we emerge into a better world. And to that end, we have, Raw as an exec, we've compiled a bunch of resources. I have linked them in the description of this video, and I will share them on Twitter once this whole thing is done. So panel, I want to come to you now. What are your responses to the protest movement we've seen across the country so far? Oscar, I'll come to you first.
I'm actually really happy that the protests are going on and everything's really happening. It's absolutely shocking to see that the state of America as it was and how everything happened. And I don't have the actual proper words to describe, because I am white in this case, so I have a lot of privilege, and I don't understand the things which has happened to these people because it doesn't apply to me, and it's something that I will never understand or never be able to relate to in this sense. So for me, it's something which I find absolutely disgusting, especially a human being attacking another human being. For me, in this sense, just makes no sense, and the whole aspect of this is just appalling and disgusting. And yeah, I just there's no. I mean, I'm lost for words with certain things.
Yeah. Neil, I'll come to you. Do you agree with Oscar saying do you support these protests as well?
Absolutely. And just to like build off of Oscar's points, I think it's I really can't describe it either. I think honestly the way that some of these protests are going in and the level of response that the police are engaging in is almost satirical. You know, people are protesting real grievances and genuine issues like with police brutality and such. And the way that a lot of instances of law enforcement respond is by committing further acts of police brutality. And I just find it quite ironic that it's so blatantly obvious the issue here. And I feel like a lot of people within just in society and then within the law enforcement in general tend to turn a blind eye. So yeah, that's my 2 cents.
Yeah. Now, obviously, this is one issue we've seen raised quite a lot, especially in our protests happening in England. People are worried that these protests are going to lead to a second spike in the coronavirus. What do you think about these concerns? Ollie, I'll come to you.
Well, specifically on this point, people worried about a second spike. I mean, the R rate has been falling now, hasn't it? For obviously it varies region by region, but it has been falling now for quite a while. And the people who are moaning about the protests currently, I didn't see them being vocal when around the time of the VE Day celebrations. So it's almost as if there is a potential that coronavirus could be spread between during these protests. There is obviously the risk. You can't eradicate it, but I don't remember the same people being as vocal 6 weeks ago when there was the VE Day celebrations. I mean, however long ago they were, or at other gatherings when people have gone to the beach. Yes, people have been concerned, but it seems to me as if I've seen more outrage on social media about this than any other gathering over the past 6 weeks, and that's a tragedy because these people are fighting for the fact they don't have basic human rights. You know, when you think that the priorities of people are completely skewed at the moment.
Yeah. Neeraj, would you agree with what Oscar said? Not what Ollie's saying?
Yeah, I agree as well. The thing is, yeah, so I've seen like figures like Farage and others just kind of criticizing these protests and then not criticizing the people on the beaches and at the VE Day protests when the R rate is higher and when they're more likely to spread the coronavirus. The thing is, yeah, the R rate is lower, so less likely to spread it. And then the other thing is that the people on the beaches were just there for fun, whereas these protests are demonstrating a very serious issue. And it certainly it's necessary for these protests to go ahead. It's just that people, and also I've noticed just when it comes to kind of, I've seen more people at the protests wearing masks than at the beaches as well.
So you're saying people who are going to these protests be more careful of coronavirus than people who are just going out to have a good time, who might be now complaining about the protest.
Yeah.
Now, I want to talk about one particular protest in general before we move on. I want to talk about one particular British protest in general before we move back to America and discuss changes being made there. Obviously, we saw it was yesterday, we saw a statue of an old slave trader be pulled down in Bristol. Firstly, I want to get your reaction to that statue being torn down. And I wanted to go and discuss the wider debate around it. So I think I'll come to you first, Neil. What was your reaction to the statue coming down?
I think that it's, I consider it a good thing because just the amount of hatred that statue portrays, and it really, like, it's a grim reminder to the dark history that both the UK and America has had with issues such as slavery. So I feel like I don't understand why the statue was there in the first place. And honestly, I'm glad that people took the initiative to take it down. And I feel like people who sort of complain about the thing, oh, it's vandalism, that's just an excuse to And they're not really looking at what the statue itself represents at a deeper level.
Yeah. Ollie, do you agree?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think it was totally right that the statue, I mean, it was incredible, really, that it still existed. And what has shocked me the most over the past day and the reaction to it on social media is the idea that it's been justified, well, the fact that it remained and existed, it was justified on educational grounds. And I find that farcical. Like, it just wouldn't be the case that you wouldn't have statues of Nazi soldiers to educate people about the Holocaust, would you? So I feel like it's just staggering that these statues existed, and I think actually that it will raise questions about a lot of other statues throughout the UK too.
Yeah, Oscar, what do you think?
Yeah, completely agree with what's been said with Neil and Ollie. It's ridiculous to have a statue which portrayed the slave trade in the time, and completely agree with the statue being tossed into the river, because it's showing ideologies which are completely wrong and have been wrong since the beginning, and it's a massive step. I think that we should really learn, us, the generation which are coming and taking over on our planet, the future generation should know and change the way we're thinking and change systems of how things have been, because there still is this systematic racism in every single country, and it has to change, because we're no longer these people anymore and we've made mistakes, but we need to move on from these mistakes and work together. There are huge crises on this earth, and this is a major point which needs to be dealt immediately, before we can focus on our own environment as well.
And Neeraj, what do you think?
Yeah, I think yes, completely right to pull down the statue. I think pulling down the statue actually taught people more. People actually are having seen the statue pulled down, they actually are learning more about colonialism, how these slave traders and others have sort of affected, especially Black people in Africa and even others across the world, and the way where the British colonized.
Yeah. Well, the panel seems to be very pro pulling down the statue, so I'll just raise some of the criticisms that have been thrown at this sort of event. One of the biggest ones has been that the right way this was, while it's moving a good thing, it wasn't the right way to do it. It should have been done through democratic processes. Oscar,
Hello?
me to see social.
Enoch, sorry, I think you froze for a minute.
Hello,
there.
Oscar? Yeah.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Did I freeze for a second? Oh,
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. All right, so obviously, one of the biggest critiques that sort of put against this sort of pulling down statue is that while it may have been right, it should have been done through proper channels, through democracy. Oscar, what do you have to say about that?
I think if it went through a democratic election, and it would have stayed up there for a lot longer period of time than it should have ever been there in the first place. And if they did that, then the statue could either been stored, it could either then been destroyed. There would have been maybe more options to keep it instead of just destroy it, which it should be destroyed, because there's no reason to have a statue representing such a horrible man in this case. And yeah, for me, I would be completely would have destroyed the statue completely just there and then.
Stress. And those of you watching, please tell us what you think about this whole issue. Neeraj, I'll come to you. What do you agree with what Oscar's saying, that it should have just been destroyed? Democracy wasn't working on this particular instance.
Yeah, I think as long as that, of course, that shouldn't be the first port of call just to pull down a statue. It's only once sort of like petitions have been used. Once sort of, I think. So I'm not actually sure about what other kind of democratic ways it could be. Maybe some sort of vote, but then, who does a vote go out to and all of that stuff? So I think it's quite complicated in terms of pulling down the getting it down democratically. It's just that once when you have a statue there, it's been there for a long time. I think people often think it should always be there. It's been there for many years, so it should stay there. And people don't often realise that things sometimes have to change.
Yeah. Ollie, do you agree?
Yeah, I do. I don't believe before now that people weren't angry about this statue existing, and I'm confident in assuming that until now other means had been tried. So as much as people respond with, well, it should have been taken down properly, it's like, well, up until now that has proved ineffective, and I believe that there have been a large portion of people that have been frustrated about this for a good many years. So it's almost as if it's a big assumption to assume that this is the first step people have taken. Like, I'm sure there was dissent about it for decades and nothing's been done. So it's like, well, I mean, everything else seems to have failed.
Yeah. So you're sort of saying that this is rather than you just being anti-democratic, this is what happens when democracy fails to help people. Is that?
Well, yeah, clearly. I mean, nothing. It's still. I don't know how long it's been there for, but it's not been taken down. And I've never seen personally any suggestions on the news over the past few years that the suggestion of it being removed. So it's almost as if nothing was working or proving effective. So, I mean, to me, I am sympathetic towards it being taken down.
Yeah, and Neil, I'll come to you to have the last word on this. Was this the right way to take down the statue?
Yeah, so I agree with everyone else on this issue, and like I think I just want to build off of Ollie's last point, and I think the failure of democracy to get rid of the statue is indicative of like a larger problem, because you can see instances of these things happening all over the country and and more specifically in the States as well. So a lot of the reason we're seeing such a high level of protest and such a mass turnout, especially this time, is because all the other previous times, democracy hasn't really allowed people to achieve the goals that exist within the Black Lives Matter movement, and that people have been trying to right these wrongs for so long through the sort of democratic system that we currently have. And as we've seen time and time again, it's sort of failed us. And so, yeah, I think the removal, what everyone else has been saying, is completely justified.
Yeah. You sort of touched it briefly there, but this obviously wasn't. What is maybe the only statue we saw torn down by protesters? It's not the only statue that's been vandalized. I think most famously, sort of the weekend, someone wrote Churchill was a racist on the Churchill statue in London. Do you think this was sort of? Do you think we should start moving towards maybe pulling down these statues that maybe glorify people with questionable historical legacies? Neeraj, I'll come to you on this.
Yeah, so as long as we sort of like, as long as we kind of think about, we come to a good conclusion. They're definitely racist. We definitely have to have a good think about them. We don't want to pull down statues where people have actually done good as well. When it comes to Churchill, whilst he did help Britain win the war, and is instrumental in keeping British morale, he did starve the people of Bengal, for example, and generally, yeah, he treated black people with contempt as well. So, and under Churchill, the British Empire continued to stand. So he certainly wasn't prepared to end British colonialism.
So yeah, I'll sort of extend the same thing to the panel there. Do you think the Churchill statue is this? Obviously, I don't want to focus it too much on the sort of that it's a Churchill statue standing up, because obviously that's a very complicated legacy. But in a more wider sense, are these statues that we have across Britain, which maybe venerate questionable figures, are they worth keeping, or is it time to say, let's take them down, have a fresh start? Ollie?
Yeah, I mean, perhaps. I mean, it's difficult, isn't it? Because there are statues that exist of a lot of people that do have questionable historical legacies. But I just want to, if you don't mind me, I want to return to the Churchill point. I just wanted to add to what has just been said, that it is possible. People seem to have some kind of to think that they have to have a binary opinion of like historical figures, like either someone was really good or someone was really bad. And I think it is possible to have a nuanced view, and I think it's also possible to admit that Churchill defeating the Nazis was a good thing, but also simultaneously acknowledge that he was a colonialist. I mean, I don't think you can have an opinion which incorporates both of those points. And I think, particularly today, it's almost as if people have got to have like a certain yes or no attitude to someone, and I think that's too simplistic.
Yeah, Neil, would you agree with what Ollie's saying there?
Yeah, I agree. And with regards to statue, I think in and of themselves, statues, like again, we can have this binary, yes, we can keep them or no, but I feel that the issue stems a lot further than statues, because at the end of the day, I don't personally see statues like as a means of like conveying information, or like these people exist within the public mind without the need for statues, especially Winston Churchill. And I feel like the deeper issue here is, how do we educate people on historical figures? Do we wipe away all their bad deeds and only focus on the good things? And so I feel like that sort of also kind of developed this whole binary between either this person was a really bad person or this person was a really good person. And I feel like there needs to be an increased level in the way we evaluate, especially within evaluate past leaders within the framework of how we teach history, and particularly British history as well.
And now you raised an interesting point there, which is now going to pull us completely off track, because I want to discuss it. How we teach British history. We've seen a growing movement across, sort of a grassroots movement, grassroots movement to change how we teach British history, to focus more on the impacts of colonialism. What do you all think about that? And also, what were you taught about colonialism when you were in school? Neeraj, I'll start with you.
Yeah, I certainly agree with teaching colonialism in schools. It's important that we gain the full picture, not just simply learn about the way Britain won the war, Second World War, for example, but also what have they done before the Second World War. Certainly, I've mainly just been taught about, like, for example, the Cold War, kind of. So I've learned all about how the fall of the Soviet Union, just kind of about the like Cuban Missile Crisis, just the Cold War, kind of Nazi Germany, and sort of Weimar Germany as well. But I haven't really learned so much about sort of how Britain kind of conquered the world in many ways, kind of conquering Africa, conquering large parts of Asia.
Yeah, Ollie, do you agree with what Neeraj sort of was saying there, that this needs to start being taught?
Yeah, it does. I remember when I was at school, there was just a massive focus on 20th century history, and anything that came before 1900, it seemed almost as if that it wasn't necessarily not taught in my school, but it was as much as you'd spend like just a few lessons on the British Empire, and I found that staggering, because when it got to GCSE, you would spend weeks and weeks on World War I and World War II. So I think, and it was a discussion I often had with my history teachers, the idea that the curriculum in Britain is kind of, it just teach the UK in a positive light, because I remember a lot of us used to question that whether in Germany they erase World War I and World War II from their history, the way they teach history, but then we also don't acknowledge that actually we currently erase a lot of bad British history from being taught, and I think it's absolutely right, and I hope these events now prove a catalyst for it to be taught more, because it needs to be, because a lot of people don't understand a great deal of British history.
Yeah, I don't want to get caught in this for too long, because I want to touch on one last topic before we leave Britain and go back to America. There's sort of been two major instances I want to sort of discuss in relation to each other. First is the use of mounted police officers in sort of respecting the London riots, and obviously the situation where a police officer fell off her horse and the horse then went rampaging and in fact hurt another rioter. Not rioter, I keep saying riots. I mean protests. I've said the word riots in newspapers too many times, and of course in Bristol, in fact, the police did not intervene to stop sort of the Thatcher being pulled down. What do you think the police's role should be in these riots, and how much force do you think they should be using? No, I keep saying riots, protests. I keep saying protests. And how much force do you think they should be using? Neil.
So I have no knowledge on how police sort of work within protests, but from my point of view, I believe that the role of a law enforcement or police within a protest should be de-escalation as the number one priority. So if it's a peaceful protest, nothing, we haven't reached like a level of violence that calls for any sort of intervention, and so I feel like police should try and facilitate the protest in a way that it doesn't lead to or escalate into further violence. And to also, and I think this, and then with regards to the pulling down of the statue, I think had the police intervened, there would be a bit more controversy, because at the end of the day, it kind of brings up the idea that a lot of people have criticized the police for their protection of private property, or not necessarily private property, but property over people. And I feel like I might have gone on a bit of a tangent, but yeah, that's it.
No, we love tangents here. Tangents fantastic. I'm sure people to say what they feel. Does anyone agree with what Neil's saying, or in particular anyone disagree with what Neil's saying? Or we just all on board across?
All aboard.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Fantastic. You know, one day I'm going to get a panel that actually does disagree with each other. One day it's going to happen. Not anytime soon, but it will eventually. Right. In that case, I think we should move away from Britain and discussing the effects here and start talking about the events in America, because has a lot has happened. So, ACAB, or all cops are a word I can't say on Raw, is the sort of the big slogan of the movement in America that urges people to abolish or majorly reform police departments. We've seen that in Minneapolis, the police department sort of started this all off by murdering George Floyd. Their mayor and councils promised to essentially abolish and replace their police department with community-led initiatives. I want to get your reaction on that first. What do you think to that sort of new movement? And then we're going to discuss the wider political implications of ACAB and the Abolish Police movement. Ollie, I'll come to you.
Oh, I felt like you could see me ready to say something, but I feel like I can simplify this up in a few words by saying that don't let anyone ever tell you that a protest doesn't work.
Oh. Simple as that. Neeraj?
So I think it's a good thing that they have that the police that Minneapolis has decided to so what does it stand for again? So
all cops are a word I can't say on.
Okay, all right. Okay. All right. So I think generally the problem in America is that the police department is often has kind of got, like, for example, vehicles of the military, and sort of very much almost been funded by the military. So I think it's great that there's reform to the police force, because it's definitely badly in need of reform.
So I want to ask, when people say abolish the police or reform the police, what sort of comes to mind when people say that? Oscar, I'll come to you.
For me, it'd be the guns. I think the major issue, I was looking at a statement in the BBC that showed that an increase of deaths in America were coinciding with the amount of weapons that the police forces in America were gaining and being given from the army. So the army, when they use set weapons, after they then get new weapons, they give the excess weapons to the police. And that is an issue in itself, because if you're giving the weapons to the police force, then because it's an issue in itself. And I think as well there's a lot of issue if educating police officers and seeing how they get into the force already. There needs a lot of reform in the police and understanding guns, I think, in America. And I know it's their First or Second Amendment, which they're not going to want to change. And with Trump, especially as a president, that was its whole presidency. It's something that they do need to change and kind of slowly, because they can't do something direct, otherwise people will rebel. But they need to slowly implement it and gradually change people's minds, because I think that might be the best option.
Yeah. Also, by the way, if you're watching or listening at home, feel free to message in or comment in and tell us what you think of the Abolish Cops movement, of anything that we talked about here today, and what comes to mind when you hear Abolish the Police, and what sort of ideas and policies that brings to mind. Now, let's move and talk about Donald Trump and the White House. Last week, we saw the mayor of DC rename the street outside the White House on Black Lives Matter. After Donald Trump, there was this actually was going back a bit further. Donald Trump gave a speech at a church in Lafayette Square, and to do so, the police were sent out to clear the street of protesters, which they did extremely violently, in action that's been disavowed by almost everyone else involved but Donald Trump. In response to that, DC's mayor has kind of has asked the National Guard to leave all DC hotels and has renamed the street from the White House Black Lives Matter Square. In response to that, Donald Trump's put up new shielding around the White House, which have now been covered in Black Lives Matter signs. So let's break this down into pieces. What do you think of Donald Trump's initial response at Lafayette Square? Do you think that was a tool appropriate thing to do? I've come to you a lot, Oscar, and I know you clearly want to say something about this, but I'm going to go to Neil first on this. Yeah.
I just think it's absolutely tone deaf, and I'm not even sure. I could be wrong, but I don't think he even gave a speech necessarily. I think it was for a photo op in front of a church, if I was correct. I think the speech was before it, and obviously,
he sort of gave half a speech there, traveled across the square, and had a photo op with the sort of Bible, and then gave the rest of his speech there. So sort of like a two-part.
Okay, fair enough. So yeah, I think it was incredibly tone deaf, and I feel like he's just doing that to appeal to a lot of his voter base, because I just think I'm not sure if it's 100% illegal, but it's just absolutely immoral to have to gas your own citizens who are peacefully protesting. They were moved by the riot police in such intense forms of violence. Also, you could get a photo op. And the funniest thing was he didn't even hold the Bible correctly. It was upside down.
Yeah. I mean, you touched on the tear gas usage there. I do want to talk more about Donald Trump, but I feel like that's all the perfect segue to discuss the use of tear gas in suppressing protests. Recently, we've seen a huge movement of people in Britain asking the government to stop sending tear gas to America. And we've seen some states in America openly admit they've used over 30 days worth of tear gas on protesters and now run out of their supply for the next month. Do we think it's appropriate to use tear gas, which is, I think, let's just put it bluntly, a chemical weapon that's outlawed by the Geneva Convention used in war times? Do you think it's appropriate to use it in suppressing protests? Neeraj, I'll come to you on this.
Definitely, it shouldn't be. Definitely, it should not be used if the protest is peaceful, because it's an act of aggression over basically when the protesters aren't causing any harm. It ideally shouldn't be used at all, but if it has to be used, then only if the protest is completely getting out of hand, which I haven't seen that much of, and certainly I've seen cases where tear gas has been used at the wrong time. So in most cases, no.
Would you guys say you agree with Neeraj and the usage of tear gas? Oscar, I'll finally come back to you.
No, I think there's no use in using tear gas because these are peaceful protests. Their demand fundamental, and the police are fighting back. They're trying to make the protesters mess up. They're trying to make things worse than it is, and therefore discredit them so that they can say, "Oh, we have got reason to use the weapons that we've got." And you're just thinking, why? Because, I mean, there are some people that are using the protests for their own gain, such as the looters who have attacked shops, or some YouTube stars which are using the protests to boost.
Oscar?
Oh.
Oscar's very briefly have to leave us. Hopefully, there he's back.
Sorry.
Fantastic. If you want to just finish your point, Oscar, then we'll.
Yeah, I was just coming up to YouTubers which are using the protest to focus on their own views and gain stuff like that, which I find is absolutely disgusting. So that's I think the weapon use should not be used.
Yeah. Now, we obviously talked about aggression, and we've seen an astounding amount of aggression come from police officers over these protests towards people who are peacefully protesting. We've seen people run off with cars. We've seen one man very famous image. We've seen an old man who was only trying to give police officers back his helmet, was knocked down, and then police officers refused to help him back up. Why do we think we're seeing this level of violence from police officers? Ollie, I'll come to you.
I really don't know. You would think at the moment now that the response of the police would arguably be, well, just as you can just tell, I really don't know what to say. I have no idea why we're seeing this response to certain police officers. You would think after what happened with George Floyd, a lot of the police officers would want to demonstrate that they aren't, that isn't across the board, and that there are a lot of police officers in the United States, but also across the world, that do care about protect his citizens. So I really don't understand why this has happened. I mean, he's trying to get into that American mentality, which he just so seldom do successfully.
Yeah. Thank you. I want to step away from that and go right back to talking about Donald Trump and the White House. So, obviously, the events of Lafayette Square happened, and now in response, the mayor of DC is renamed the road outside the White House Black Lives Matter Avenue. I want just really give me your reactions to that. Do you think this is a great political move, a magnificent act of trolling, or petty and political in a time we don't really need it? Neeraj, I'll come to you.
I think it's quite a nice thing that he's renamed the street, especially kind of to contrast the way Trump is just simply holding up a Bible and appealing to his followers. So I think certainly it's quite nice to see some sort of opposition to what Trump is doing.
Panel, do you agree?
Yeah.
Completely.
Again, universal agreement. This is truly, you guys are just going to burn through my topics. I really hope there'll be more, if not arguing on the grand scheme of things, in the details there'll be more arguing. Okay, so now let's get to Trump's new security barrier. Because apparently the old White House fence and all the security and every member of the Secret Service were not enough. Donald Trump has now erected a fence around a second fence around the White House to protect himself from peaceful protesters. He's finally built that wall, but Mexico has not paid for it. Panel, let's just get your. Do you think? Just give me reactions to it. What do you think of Donald Trump erecting this new fence to protect himself from peaceful protesters? Neil.
I think it's more of a statement rather than a security measure, because obviously he's the president of the United States. They're going to protect him at all costs. He can go into a bunker or whatever. I think it's more of a message that he's not willing to understand the grievances that these people have. And that's so evident with his rhetoric as well. He focuses so much on such a small portion of the protests. He keeps on going on about these Antifa thugs and things like that, where he's intentionally obfuscating it to the point where people believe that it's not necessarily a peaceful movement, which in reality, it almost 99% of the time it is. And so I think it's either he's just afraid, or he's trying to be strategic, especially given the whole upcoming election.
Well, you say the upcoming election. We reached a milestone recently. Joe Biden polled over 55% more than Donald Trump in an election campaign polling, which is the highest any sort of candidates polled against an opponent since Ronald Reagan's time, essentially. And especially, poignant looking back 2016, Hillary Clinton rarely polled at 50%. 50%. So Joe Biden is now blowing. The gap is now widening and widening. How do we think this impacted Trump's hopes of being re-elected? Ollie?
I would say it will have concerned him, but obviously I think all of his actions that he's taken over the past few weeks he's had no intent of showing solidarity with the Black Lives Matter campaign. All it has been is at the back of his mind the entire time is what he says is going to impact him politically. And I think, one, it's just a damning indictment to him as an individual, but I do hope that the polling is accurate, like I'm sure most of the planet do too. But no, I think that it will have concerned him. But what does worry me the most about Trump, I don't know if anyone else believes this too, but I think even if he did lose by democratic means, he would, in his final 3 months before obviously the new president Joe Biden would take over, I think he would do his utmost to just try and prevent it or stop it from happening. I really think he would be a bad loser come October.
Obviously Donald Trump is very famous before the 2016 election, floated claims that the vote was already rigged against him.
Exactly.
And then even once he won, he was already it's sort of part of his election preparation routine. So he gets up in the morning, brushes his teeth, claims the election is rigged, and goes about his day. Neeraj, what do you think about Donald? What do you think about his new poll? Do you think Donald Trump has a good chance of winning the 2020 election?
I don't. I mean, it's hard to say really. We're still some way off in the election, and the thing is, if America does reopen, the economy does bounce back, then there's a real chance of him being re-elected. Because if the economy does bounce back, he's very much about the stock markets. Then he could end up being in power. But of course, if if the protests, but it does look increasingly likely that the protests are driving home an important point that Trump has kind of neglected a lot of minority people in America, and I think that could go against him, especially now everyone's sort of kind of joining the Black Lives kind of protests. I think it's perhaps a possibility that Joe Biden could actually win the election.
Yeah. I mean, if you have any opinions on this, if you think Trump's can still pull it back or Joe's guaranteed to win, please comment along. If you have any thoughts on anything we said today, just leave a comment and tell us what you think. In fact, maybe you could be the one to disagree with our panel. Maybe that could be where we get some debate coming in. Yeah, so I guess before we leave the Black Lives Matter topic alone and transfer on to our next sort of set of topics, any last words from the panel?
I mean, I've got a few.
Yeah, same.
I missed what Oscar said, so I don't. Oscar, what did you say?
I said I have a few comments, but
great. Yeah, no, please.
Okay.
We have 20 minutes left.
I mean, I think with the whole Trump thing, first of all, I don't know if any of you saw the video of Trump going to the church. It was a whole propaganda video. I laughed the whole way through. It's. I think the other thing that really annoyed me, and I think I would know that a lot of other people got more annoyed than I would or did, was when Trump mentioned George Floyd and actually said that he's looking down and he's saying this is a good day for him and for everyone. And I was just thinking, how dare you? You have no right in this sense to use that name. You've abused the people that you've worked with. You abused the people that make the country work. You have just made lives horrendous for loads of people, especially in America, where you bought out some houses, and especially with the Taj Mahal casino, where he didn't even pay half of the employees, where he got a lot of Polish people to come and build the hotel, and then when it was built, they didn't even pay them. So he's been abusing people and loads of other people since he's been since the 1990s. And I think that for what we do need, especially in America, is a change from not another old white man or a middle-aged white man anymore in power. It has to be a full change. It has to be a younger generation, someone who is of color or who is more. It has to be a change. They can't keep on the same pattern that it's been for the last 100 to 200 years, because that is where the issues are. Old white men in this case with the same views and don't want to change anything.
And hopefully Joe Biden can be a change we need then. And then Neil, any last words?
Yeah, so I had with regards to, I wanted to bring this up earlier, but we kind of segued into a different topic, and that was the sort of optics that we have with the phrase "abolish the police." Because I understand the sentiment, and I agree that there's a stunning amount of reform that is needed. But it isn't necessarily good optics, because the way people tend to perceive something like that is to say, oh, we want to completely disband the police force, which I don't think is the sort of favored opinion amongst most of the Black people within the Black Lives Matter movement. I could be wrong. And I feel that a lot of people are quite reactionary, and so they will tend to disagree a lot with that point, even if the point abolish the police doesn't necessarily mean remove the entire police force. But I would say that I think the way that we need to present solutions is more from a reformist point of view rather than a complete abolitionist, because I feel a lot of people will tend to lose sight of or lose interest in that amount of change if we simply say, oh, our change is to abolish the police, etc.
Yeah. Any other final comments?
That's all.
Yeah, that's all. Well, moving on to another conversation that's been going on for far too long. Madeleine McCann was back in the news this week as the German police announced they have a new suspect in the case. Now, for reasons of German law, obviously this is actually true. Raw News cannot we cannot share the picture because we're an international website. The German laws are very strict about this. And as newspapers learned all of last week when the BBC wasn't allowed to say it, but of course, and newspapers had to print it, but had to censor it when they went on the BBC. So, firstly, I want to ask, how familiar is everyone here with the Madeleine McCann case in the first place?
Not really, I'm afraid.
No,
I mean,
well,
sort of.
So. I mean, yeah, I vaguely remember a time when it was almost the only news story we had in this country. I remember when that must seem bizarre looking back at it. Obviously, and so it's become quite a big controversy in this country that the Madeleine McCann cases have been carried on for so long. Whenever missing persons cases or missing children's cases, especially, tend to be left alone. Why do you think this case has so captured public imagination and then so captured police attention and funding? Neeraj, I'll come to you first.
To be fair, I'm not actually that sure why it has. It might just be because, I mean, of course, people. I mean, she was quite young, of course, and so maybe it could be because of that. But it does seem a bit strange how people have been so focused on finding her rather than, for example, the kind of the planes like the MH370 and stuff. And sort of, I mean, that investigation was called off some time ago.
Yeah, Ollie, would you agree with what Neeraj is saying there?
Yeah, I think in answer to the question about why it got so much, why it's had so much coverage over the past 13 years, is because to the media, she is like one of us. She's us as in the media as a collective term. She's white and from a middle class family. I think it's scandalous. I think I was reading the other day that over £11 million of taxpayers' money had been spent on the case, and I think it's just an abomination. Like, children go missing so regularly and all the time, and they get little, or I imagine in a lot of cases, no coverage. And I think also it's an excellent example of white privilege, because if she would have been from a black family or from a more working class family, then it would have got absolutely nowhere near the coverage that it's had. And I'm sorry to sound heartless, but this case really, really does annoy me.
I mean, obviously, I won't say this rest of the panel. Then, do you agree with what Ollie's saying that this case only received the clever coverage it has because Madeleine McCann is from a middle-class white family, and if she come from any other sort of class strata, she would not have been. It would not have been the same thing. Neil.
I agree as well. Yeah, I think that could be an explanation for the amount of not relevance, but the amount of media attention that this case gets. But I feel like within the public discourse, I feel like a lot of people are also kind of tired of hearing about it, and sort of that's maybe why I think people have started to air more grievances about the case. And I'm not sure if this is true or anything, but I do believe there's like quite a bit of a movement about. I think people are always. It's sort of the mystery to themselves as well, and I think some people believe that the parents did it and things like that. So there's all these conspiracy theories and going on, and I think that's what some people feel entertained by it. That's kind of the cynic in me would say.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. Our side just have a very perverse relationship with crimes and cold cases, and but something. Okay, now we discussed that. We want to touch on that briefly. I want to also talk about the way German case law works and how we can't show the picture of the person accused or spread their name around. Compare that to English law, where of course means have to freely do so. Do you think the Germans had the correct way of doing it, or do you prefer our way? Oscar, as our European correspondent, I'll come to you first.
Well, I'd say as each country has their own way of dealing with criminals, I think the German way of not being able to show the image and cover up certain aspects of the person that's involved does allow them to maybe focus a bit more and maybe not have the media be at every turn where the police are, so that the police can focus a bit more on their investigation. I mean, for people who are interested in it, there does need to be a bit more research, and they do need to hear more from the police, and then eventually the police will give the name and images and other things like that. But I think it's interesting to see different countries work, how they work, and how police systems work.
Panel, I'll send a question to all of you, and you can all, whoever wants to answer, those go first. Do you agree with what Oscar said? Do you think the German way works, or do you prefer the English way?
I think it's a bit of a double-edged sword, the German method. And so obviously with increased awareness of the potential suspects, there could be the opportunity to for the public to maybe someone has information on the suspect and could maybe provide new evidence to the case. So that's something that the German police might miss out on. But like Oscar said, there is an element of the media intertwining themselves within the case, and often that can lead to large amounts of like sensationalism, and that sort of creates these different narratives within the case where people they don't necessarily, like a lot of perhaps public opinion and such isn't necessarily fact-based within the evidence surrounding the case, but rather the sort of media narrative that comes to play. And I feel like that shouldn't be part of a police investigation.
Yeah. Well, that's been a really fruitful discussion with Madeline McCann there. I want to talk to our last topic of today, Prince Andrew, who's back in the hot seat, and it's come out that he was asked to cooperate with a mutual legal aid agreement with America, and they wanted to testify about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Obviously, we saw last year that became a major sort of heat. I mean, one of my blow-up point for the royal family. He was interviewed by the BBC, and many horrifying stories are circulating around Prince Andrew with Jeffrey Epstein. I want to just come to you all first and get your reaction to this latest element of Prince Andrew saga. Ollie, you had some very clear earlier. I want to see what you think now.
My opinion on this is that I think he should cooperate because he hasn't done thus far, and I think by refusing to answer questions, I mean, I hope he will, but I mean, if he doesn't, then it just shows a total disrespect for the victims, doesn't it? And I think, I mean, he said in the past which he never suspected any wrongdoing by Epstein, so I think that would make me question that if that's the case and that's true, then why has he been so reluctant to answer questions thus far? I hope he does.
Yeah. Neeraj, what do you think?
Yeah, I definitely hope he does cooperate with the investigation, as Ollie said. Yeah, I think it's important for kind of the authorities to know more about what's done. They need the full picture. Yeah, kind of.
Yeah, and Neil.
Yeah, I agree as well. I think he should really cooperate, and like Ollie said, if he doesn't, that kind of arouses more suspicions, and that's really all I have to say, to be honest.
Well, I do think this is one topic where we're not going to get that again, a very vast array of responses. I even sitting here as an impartial observer, I struggle to see an argument in favor of ignoring a legal summons about your relationship with a known pedophile. And so I think we're going to have to start drawing the show to a close. One last question. Obviously, we're in a time of lockdown easing here in England, and I know France also had a looser lockdown. So now that lockdown's sort of coming to an end, do you guys have any plans now that you couldn't do before that you now feel like you can do?
Well, I'm not currently in the UK, so I'm still kind of in lockdown. Oh. Yeah.
Where are you now, and what's the situation there?
My family lives in Dubai, so I'm with them right now, and we've as a city or as a country, the UAE more or less has sort of opened up the economy, but then there's also that. So I think that's going to occur in many other countries as well, and we're seeing that. But then on a personal level, you also have to make the decision, or you have to weigh the risks, because perhaps you might be living with someone who might be at risk. So while you can possibly legally go out and do things, you need to think to yourself, is this the most responsible action that I can take? Am I putting others at risk by my legal but maybe not responsible actions?
Yeah. Paul, I said the same question to you, and also, do you agree with what Neil's saying?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, here in France, the lockdown has eased a lot more, and more shops are open, and you can actually meet up with other people, as long as you're still wearing a mask, and you can actually, unlike the UK government where you can't go to someone's house and have intimate things there. So in France, you can do that. France, it's one of the places where you can do that, as long as you're wearing a mask. I think, which is still quite weird, but people can still meet up. People can go outside. Here, the beaches are opening up, and tourists are actually coming down. So we've got tourists a bit from Germany, France, and I think Italy as well, because borders are now opening up a bit more.
Yeah, thank you, Oscar, for the timely reminder. In the UK currently, it's illegal to have carnal relations with anyone outside your house, inside your house. The rules of doing it outside are unknown to me, but that's up to you to find out. Any last remarks on this before we sort of start to bring the show to an end?
I was just going to say that. Oh, Karen. The only thing I was going to add to this was that I live in the West Midlands, which is just outside of the Northwest, and I'm not sure if any of you saw on the news over the past week that the R rate is suspected to have gone above 1 in the Northwest again. So whether we will be getting any regional kind of lockdown rules that change over the next few weeks will be interesting to see.
Oh yeah, that will be something to watch, and hopefully we'll have space to actually talk about lockdown on the show by then. Although I think we've really discussed all aspects of coronavirus entire, I would say 8-week run of the show now. So
yeah.
We only have 2 shows left, so watch out for that, everyone.
I don't want to butt in, but I don't know if you've had the BBC News alert just.
Oh yes, actually that is something. Yeah,
because it leads on to what you were just talking about.
Is this one about the lowest number of deaths we've had?
No.
It's another one.
No.
I've not had the one. Please read it out.
It's just come up on my phone that it says Prince Andrew says he offered to help US officials at least 3 times in inquiry into sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. So it's kind of more information regarding that case. But as it just popped up on my phone, I feel like I should have amplified it to the.
No, I mean, please, panel, immediate reactions to that new piece of news.
I think that so from what I gather, he's attempted to help them out in the past. Is that what it's saying?
3 times.
Yeah, so that just shows the fault of like the people investigating in the first place, because it's just the only reason that the investigation has sort of come back to light is because of the sort of controversy surrounding other celebrities and obviously the death of Jeffrey Epstein as well. So I feel like the investigation in and of itself should have been more thorough and should have been more consistent throughout.
One thing I might ask is, do you think he's telling the truth? Do you think Prince Andrew is telling the truth currently?
Well, I mean, sort of.
Oscar's just shaking his head for anyone who's going to listen to this once I make it a podcast. Yeah. Neeraj?
No, I'm not sure he is. Like he talked about the sweating issue. Like that's amazing. I don't know. I don't think any of us can really trust whatever he says, really. So.
Yeah. To clarify what Neeraj is saying there, Prince Andrew claims he has not sweated in, was it 18 years? Or the man, so he's not quite 18 years. It had something to do with a Pizza Express in Woking. I wasn't really paying attention at the time. It was a very bizarre series of events. But yeah, well, I think on that note, we should probably start drawing the show to a close, because I don't think we can take any more news at this point. But yeah, thank you everyone. Thank you Oscar, Neeraj, Neel, and Ollie for coming on. You were absolutely brilliant guests. So thank you so much for coming onto the show. Just one last thing I want to say before we end I let you all go and I stop holding you up on your day. As I said earlier, if you want to at all help support the protest movement, there's a link in the description of this video offering you resources. You can educate yourself, petitions you can sign, and a letter you can use to write to your MP, and of course, places you can donate to help fund bail release funds and all sorts of educational programs to help support communities communities of color in America. One other thing I want to say is, it is, as I said at the beginning of the show, it is Pride Week here at Raw, and Raw News is absolutely going to do something to support that, which I'm happy to announce the Pridecast is happening. If you're interested in getting involved in the Pridecast, which is essentially going to be a podcast discussing issues facing the LGBTQA plus community that are sort of either underlooked or ignored by the larger mainstream media, please contact me and I'll add you to the sort of conversation we're having. And also, if you want to get involved in anything we're doing here at Raw News, be a show, a podcast, a video project, just join the Raw News group on Facebook, where we post all our opportunities, and you can find out more. But lastly, I want to say thank you for watching and listening this week. You've been absolutely fantastic. You're actually fantastic audience. Thank you.